My name is Callum Hayes, and I did not lose everything slowly. London took it from me in 1 week. 7 days was all it took to turn my life from stable to silent. On Monday morning, nothing felt unusual. I woke up at the same time, made coffee in the same small kitchen, and got ready for work like I had done for years. My wife, Jade, was quiet that morning, but she had been quiet for weeks, so I told myself it was just stress. I remember tying my tie in the mirror and thinking about nothing important. That is the strange thing about disaster. It does not warn you. It lets you feel normal right before it changes everything. I worked at a logistics company near London Bridge. It was not a glamorous job, but it was stable. I had worked hard to get there. I believed stability meant security. At 9:17 that morning, my manager sent me a message asking for a quick meeting. I did not panic. I walked in calmly. But when I saw someone from HR already sitting there, I knew something was wrong. They used soft words like restructuring and market conditions. They said it was not about performance. They said the company had to make difficult decisions. What they really meant was that I was no longer needed. They asked for my access card before I left the room. That small piece of plastic felt heavier than it should have. When I stepped outside into the cold London air, the city was still moving like nothing had happened. People were laughing, traffic was flowing, life was normal. But mine had already shifted. I did not call Jade right away. I wanted to sound calm when I told her. I wanted to have a plan. When I got home that evening and told her I had been let go, she did not react the way I expected. She did not shout or cry. She simply nodded and said, "Oh." That one word carried more distance than anger ever could. Over the next 2 days, I applied for every job I could find. I updated my CV, sent emails, made calls. No responses came back. The silence from employers felt heavy, but the silence inside my own home felt worse. Jade was present, but she was not with me. She spent more time on her phone. She smiled at messages she did not share. She stepped into other rooms to take calls. I noticed, but I told myself not to assume anything. On Wednesday night, everything became clear. Jade was in the shower when her phone lit up on the table. I was not looking for trouble. But I saw the name before I could stop myself. Aaron Knight. The message preview was short. It said, "Does he still not know?" I did not need more than that. My chest tightened, but I did not shout. I did not throw the phone. I simply sat there and stared at the screen until it went dark again. In that moment, I understood something was ending, and it was not just my job. When I asked her about it later, she did not deny it. She did not fight it. She spoke calmly, almost gently. She said Aaron was stable. She said he knew where he was going in life. She said things had been difficult between us for a while. I asked her when it started, but she could not give me a clear answer. That meant it had been building long before I noticed. The hardest sentence she said to me that week was simple. She looked at me and said, "You're not the man you used to be, Callum." That sentence stayed with me longer than the HR meeting. It felt like a final judgment. It made me question who I had become and when I had changed. By Friday, the house no longer felt like home. We moved around each other like strangers sharing space. I tried to fix it. I told her I would find something soon. I told her I would work harder, take any job, rebuild. But I could see in her eyes that she had already stepped away emotionally. It was not anger I saw. It was detachment. That hurt more. On Sunday, I packed a small bag. She did not stop me. She did not ask where I was going. That silence confirmed what I already knew. I left without drama because there is something more painful than being thrown out, and that is staying where you are no longer wanted. I drove without a plan and ended up parking under a streetlight in South London. The rain started late that night. It hit the windshield slowly at first, then harder. I turned off the engine and leaned back in the seat. My phone battery was low. There were no missed calls. No messages from Jade asking if I was safe. No apology. Nothing. That was the moment it truly settled in. In 1 week, I had lost my job, my marriage, and my home. The city lights reflected through the rain on the glass, and I sat there thinking about how quickly everything can change. 7 days earlier, I had structure. I had routine. I had identity. Now I had a back seat and uncertainty. But something else was happening in that silence. When you lose everything at once, there is no more pretending. No more comfort. No more hiding behind routine. You are forced to look at yourself without distractions. That night in the car, I asked myself a question I had been avoiding for years. Had I become comfortable? Had I stopped pushing forward? Had I assumed stability would protect me forever? Maybe Jade was wrong to leave the way she did, but maybe I had also ignored the slow signs that my life had stopped growing. It is easy to blame betrayal, but harder to examine yourself. As the rain continued, I realized something important. I had been afraid of losing everything. I thought it would destroy me. But sitting there in that car, I felt something different. I felt exposed, yes. I felt embarrassed. I felt replaced. But I also felt strangely clear. There was nothing left to protect. No image to maintain. No one to impress. When a man reaches that point, something shifts inside him. Fear begins to lose its power. I did not know how I was going to rebuild. I did not know how long it would take. But for the first time that week, I stopped thinking about Aaron Knight and started thinking about myself. That week did not just take my job and my marriage. It stripped away the version of me that believed comfort was enough. It forced me into the cold. It forced me into silence. And sometimes, silence is where strength begins. I did not understand it fully that night, but losing everything was not the end of my story. It was the moment the old version of Callum Hayes ended. The man sitting in that car was not finished. He was being rebuilt. And London, the same city that had taken everything from me in 7 days, was about to watch what happens when a man has nothing left to lose. The morning after I slept in my car for the first time. I woke up stiff, confused for a second about where I was, then reality settled in again like cold air. The windows were fogged, and the city was already moving. Buses passed. People walked by with headphones on, holding coffee, living their normal lives. I stayed still for a moment, watching them through the glass, realizing how quickly a person can become invisible. Just 1 week earlier I had been one of them, rushing to work, thinking about meetings and deadlines. Now I was parked on the side of a street trying to figure out where I could wash my face without anyone noticing I had slept in my car. That morning was not dramatic. It was quiet. And sometimes quiet pain lasts longer than loud pain. I drove to a gym I used to go to and paid for a weekly pass because it was cheaper than anything else. I showered quickly, avoiding eye contact with my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired, but not broken. That surprised me. I expected to look destroyed. Instead, I looked awake. Over the next few days, I created a routine because routine is the only thing that keeps you steady when everything else feels unstable. I would wake up early before the streets got busy, drive somewhere safe, freshen up at the gym, then sit in cafes with my laptop applying for jobs. I kept my clothes clean and my beard trimmed. I refused to look defeated. But rejection emails came in like clockwork. We regret to inform you. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. Some companies did not even reply. I started to understand that losing a job is not just about income. It is about identity. When people ask what you do, they are not really asking about your salary. They are asking where you fit in the world. And I no longer had an answer. A few friends messaged at first after they heard I had been let go. They said things like, "You'll bounce back," and "Let me know if you need anything." I replied politely and told them I was fine. After a week, the messages slowed down. After 2 weeks, they stopped. I did not blame them. People are comfortable around success. Struggle makes them uneasy. I saw photos online of Jade and Aaron at a restaurant in Shoreditch. She looked relaxed. Happy, even. Aaron had his arm around her like he belonged there. It felt strange seeing my wife step into another life so smoothly. There was no sign of chaos. No sign of regret. It looked clean, organized, almost planned. That hurt in a different way. It made me question how long she had been emotionally gone before I noticed. But I made a decision during that time. I would not react publicly. I would not send angry messages. I would not post anything dramatic. I would not beg. I would not explain myself to people who had already decided who I was. Silence became my protection. Every time I felt the urge to confront Aaron or argue with Jade, I stopped and asked myself what it would change. The answer was always the same. Nothing. Anger might release pressure for a moment, but it would not rebuild my life. I started spending more time thinking about what I could control instead of what I had lost. I reviewed my skills honestly. I had experience in logistics and operations, but I had been comfortable. I had not upgraded my knowledge in years. The industry had evolved. Technology had changed. I had stayed the same. That realization was uncomfortable, but it was honest. Instead of seeing myself as a victim of restructuring, I began to see that I had allowed my growth to slow down. That thought did not excuse betrayal, but it gave me direction. At night, when the city quieted down and the car felt smaller, I began watching online courses on supply chain optimization and digital systems. I took notes. I studied like I was back in school. It was not glamorous. There was no applause. No one knew. But something inside me began to feel active again. I was no longer just surviving. I was preparing. Money was tight. I sold a few personal items quietly. A watch I once valued for status became fuel for groceries. I learned the difference between pride and ego. Pride keeps you moving. Ego keeps you stuck. Sleeping in the car tested my ego. It whispered that I was failing, that Jade was right, that Aaron was better positioned, more stable, more impressive. But pride answered differently. It said this is temporary if you stay focused. One afternoon, while working from a small cafe near Peckham, I overheard two business owners discussing delivery delays and inventory problems. I listened carefully. The issues they described were problems I understood deeply. I did not interrupt them immediately. I waited. When they stood up to leave, I introduced myself politely and told them I had experience in logistics operations. I offered a few suggestions in simple terms. They were surprised I understood their issues so clearly. We exchanged details. It was not a job offer. It was just a conversation. But it was the first time since losing everything that I felt useful again. That night, parked under another streetlight, I realized something important. Being invisible had advantages. No one expected anything from me anymore. No one was watching. That meant I could rebuild without pressure. Jade and Aaron were living their story. Let them. I had to build mine. I stopped checking her social media. I stopped asking mutual friends about her. I stopped replaying old conversations in my head. The more I withdrew from that emotional noise, the clearer my mind became. Pain started turning into focus. I began tracking my days carefully. Every morning had a goal. Every afternoon had a task. Every evening had study time. I did not need motivation speeches. I needed discipline. The city that once felt like it had rejected me now felt like a training ground. London is tough. It does not slow down for anyone. If you cannot keep up, it moves on. Instead of feeling offended by that truth, I accepted it. The world does not owe you comfort. It rewards value. Slowly, something changed in the way I carried myself. Even though my bank account was low and my sleeping arrangement was temporary, my mind felt sharper. I was no longer reacting. I was building quietly. And that shift, small as it seemed, was powerful. Because the moment you stop chasing what left you and start investing in what can grow you, you take back control. Was not about revenge. It was about becoming steady in the middle of humiliation. It was about choosing silence over drama and focus over anger. I was still in my car. I was still unemployed. Jade was still with Aaron Knight. But something was different now. I was no longer invisible to myself. And that was the beginning of everything changing. Where everything began to shift quietly, not in a dramatic way, but in a steady and powerful way that even I did not fully understand at first. By then I had stopped counting how many nights I had slept in my car because I did not want to measure my life by struggle anymore. Instead, I started measuring it by progress. Every morning I woke up before the sun rose, not because I had to, but because I wanted to stay ahead of my own thoughts. The early hours were peaceful, and peace helped me think clearly. I kept my routine simple and strict. Gym, shower, coffee, applications, study, networking, repeat. At first it felt like survival, but slowly it began to feel like discipline. And discipline has a way of rebuilding a man from the inside. I no longer checked Jade's social media. I no longer wondered what Aaron Knight was doing. I stopped asking mutual friends about them. I realized that every minute I spent thinking about them was a minute I was not investing in myself. That decision alone gave me back more power than I expected. I focused on learning new systems in logistics and digital supply chain management because I understood that the industry was changing and I needed to change with it. I watched courses, read case studies, and practiced solutions as if I were already hired. I did not wait for permission to grow. One afternoon, the two business owners I had spoken to in the cafe called me. They said they were struggling with warehouse delays and wanted advice. It was not a formal contract, just a small consultation. But I treated it like a major opportunity. I prepared properly, studied their model, and offered clear and simple solutions. I spoke calmly and confidently, not as a desperate man, but as someone who understood his value. A week later, they paid me for my work. It was not a huge amount of money, but it was earned with skill, not sympathy. That payment felt different from a salary. It felt personal. It proved that I still had something valuable to offer. That small win changed my mindset completely. Instead of applying for hundreds of jobs hoping someone would choose me, I began thinking about how I could create value directly. I reached out to small businesses that could not afford large consulting firms. I offered affordable solutions and flexible arrangements. Many ignored me, but some replied. Every reply gave me experience. Every experience built confidence. I reinvested every pound I earned into better tools, better software, and better knowledge. I kept my expenses low and my focus high. Slowly, I was no longer just surviving. I was building something real. The nights in the car became fewer because I was able to rent a small studio flat in a modest part of South London. It was not impressive, but it was mine. The first night I slept there, I did not feel rich. I felt responsible. That room represented effort. It represented growth. I remember sitting on the floor because I had not bought furniture yet, and realizing that I was proud of myself. Not because I had defeated anyone, but because I had not given up on myself. During this time, something else changed inside me. I stopped feeling the need to prove anything. When you lose everything publicly, you feel exposed. But when you rebuild privately, you feel grounded. I began walking differently, speaking differently, thinking differently. I was no longer chasing validation. I was chasing improvement. And improvement is quiet. Weeks turned into months. The small consultations grew into steady contracts. Word spread among business owners. They appreciated that I understood real problems and offered practical solutions. I was not flashy. I was reliable. Reliability builds trust. Trust builds reputation. Reputation builds opportunity. I did not wake up one morning suddenly successful. It happened slowly, like sunrise. The light increased bit by bit until I realized I was no longer standing in darkness. One evening, I checked my bank account and saw an amount I had not seen in years. Not from a company paying me a salary, but from my own work. I sat back and smiled, not because of the money, but because of what it represented. I had rebuilt from nothing. I had turned rejection into direction. Around that same time, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Jade. She kept it simple. She asked how I was doing. I stared at the screen for a while. Months earlier, that message would have shaken me. Now it felt different. I did not feel anger. I did not feel excitement. I felt calm. I replied politely and briefly, telling her I was fine and hoped she was well. That was all. I did not ask about Aaron. I did not reopen old wounds. That chapter of my life no longer defined me. The most powerful change was not financial. It was internal. I realized that losing everything had forced me to become someone stronger and more aware. I had stopped blaming circumstances and started taking ownership. I had stopped chasing comfort and started chasing growth. And growth had rewarded me slowly but surely. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was steady. It was where I stopped being a victim of a bad week and became the architect of a better future. I was no longer the man who lost his job, his marriage, and his home in 7 days. I was the man who learned how to rebuild without noise, without revenge, and without needing applause. And the quiet strength I gained during that time would soon change everything. Not about becoming rich overnight or proving anyone wrong in a dramatic way. It was about the moment I realized I was no longer the same man who had slept in his car under a streetlight in South London. By then, nearly 3 years had passed since the week I lost everything. My consulting work had grown steadily. What started as small advice sessions in cafes had turned into long-term contracts with growing companies that trusted my judgment. I built a small team, nothing large or flashy, just skilled people who cared about doing the job properly. We focused on efficiency, digital systems, and practical solutions for businesses that were tired of complicated advice that did not work in real life. My name began to circulate quietly in business circles. Not in newspapers, not on billboards, but in conversations. And conversations are powerful because they carry credibility. I moved into a better flat, not in a luxury area, but in a clean, modern space that reflected who I had become. I bought furniture slowly, choosing quality over appearance. I dressed well, but not to impress anyone. I dressed well because I respected myself again. The biggest difference was internal. I no longer woke up with anxiety. I woke up with purpose. One afternoon, I received an email invitation to speak at a business networking event in Canary Wharf. It was a mid-sized event for entrepreneurs and investors. They wanted me to speak about operational resilience and adapting after business setbacks. I almost laughed when I read the topic. They had no idea how personal that subject was to me. I accepted calmly. I did not see it as a stage to show off. I saw it as a moment to reflect on how far I had come. The evening of the event arrived, and as I adjusted my suit in the mirror, I noticed something important. My hands were steady. Years earlier, I would have been nervous about being judged. Now I felt composed. When I arrived at the venue, the lighting was warm and soft, very different from the cold blue nights I once spent in my car. The room was filled with conversation and quiet confidence. As I stepped inside, I felt the weight of memory, not pain, just awareness. Then I saw her. Jade stood near the bar, dressed elegantly, speaking with a small group. Beside her was Aaron Knight. He looked polished, confident, exactly as I remembered. For a brief moment, time felt suspended. Not because I missed her, but because I remembered who I used to be when she last saw me. That version of me was tired, uncertain, defeated. The man standing there now was different. Jade noticed me a few seconds later. Her expression shifted slightly, not dramatically, but enough for me to see surprise. Aaron followed her gaze and saw me too. We did not approach each other immediately. I continued greeting people, shaking hands, discussing projects. I was not pretending to be busy. I was busy. That difference mattered. After a while, Jade walked toward me. Her voice was polite, almost cautious. She said I looked well. I thanked her calmly and asked how she had been. The conversation was short and balanced. There was no tension, no anger. Aaron joined us briefly and extended his hand. I shook it firmly. In that handshake, there was no rivalry. There was only acknowledgement. The room did not feel heavy anymore. It felt neutral. When it was time for me to speak, I walked to the stage without rushing. I did not tell my full personal story. I did not mention betrayal or sleeping in a car. Instead, I spoke about resilience in simple terms. I explained that businesses fail when they stop adapting and people fail when they stop growing. I said that losing stability can either destroy you or refine you depending on how you respond. I kept my language clear and honest. I saw people nodding. I saw investors taking notes. When I finished, the applause was steady and sincere. That sound did not inflate my ego. It grounded me. After the talk, several people approached me with questions and partnership ideas. Among the crowd, I saw Jade watching quietly. There was something different in her eyes now. Not regret exactly, but recognition. She was seeing a version of me she had not believed would exist. Later that evening, as the event began to wind down, she approached me once more. She said she was proud of how far I had come. I thanked her sincerely. There was no bitterness left in me. That surprised even me. I realized in that moment that true growth is not about making others feel small. It is about becoming secure enough that you no longer need their approval. When I left the building that night and stepped into the cool London air, I paused for a second and looked at the skyline. Years earlier, that same city had felt like it swallowed me whole. Now it felt like a partner in my journey. It had not changed. I had. The same streets, the same trains, the same offices. But I was not the man who believed stability would last forever without effort. I was not the man who defined himself by a job title or someone else's opinion. Chapter 4 was not about revenge or proving Jade wrong. It was about standing in a room that once would have intimidated me and realizing I belonged there. It was about shaking Aaron Knight's hand without anger because I no longer measured myself against him. It was about hearing applause and understanding that the real victory had happened long before that night, in the quiet mornings, in the car, in the cafes, in the small decisions to keep going. Success did not erase my past. It gave it meaning. And as I walked toward my car that evening, not to sleep in it but to drive home to a place I earned, I understood something clearly. The week London took everything from me was not a curse. It was a turning point. And the man who once felt invisible was now fully present, not because others were watching, but because he finally saw himself clearly. Not loud, and it was not dramatic, but it was powerful in a way that only quiet victories can be. By the time I stood fully settled in my new life, I understood something that I could not see on the night I slept in my car. Losing everything had not been the end of my story. It had been the removal of everything that was keeping me small. I had once believed that stability meant safety, that a steady job and a familiar routine were enough to protect me. But comfort can slowly weaken ambition, and routine can quietly reduce growth. When London took my job, my marriage, and my home in 1 week, it felt cruel. Now I see it was honest. It forced me to confront who I had become and who I needed to be. I did not rebuild my life to prove Jade wrong, and I did not grow my business to compete with Aaron Knight. At first, I thought I was moving forward because of them, but that was not true. I moved forward because I refused to stay broken. The biggest change in my life was not the money, not the contracts, not the events in Canary Wharf. The biggest change was internal. I learned how to sit in discomfort without running from it. I learned how to accept responsibility without blaming the world. I learned that silence can be more powerful than arguments and discipline more effective than anger. When Jade and I eventually spoke again months after the networking event, the conversation was calm and respectful. There were no dramatic confessions, no desperate attempts to reopen what had ended. We both understood that life had moved us in different directions. I wished her well sincerely, and I meant it. That surprised me more than anything else. Years earlier, I thought I would always carry resentment. But growth has a way of clearing space inside you. Holding anger requires energy, and I preferred to invest my energy in building. Aaron Knight was no longer a rival in my mind. He was simply part of a chapter that shaped me. And that realization felt freeing. As my business continued to grow, I began mentoring younger professionals who felt lost after setbacks. I saw pieces of my old self in them. I told them honestly that failure does not destroy a man unless he stops moving. I explained that rejection is not a verdict, it is a redirection. I shared that the most dangerous moment in life is not when you lose everything, but when you become comfortable with too little growth. I did not speak from theory. I spoke from experience. Sometimes, late at night, I still drive past the street where I once parked under that flickering light. I do not stop there, but I slow down. Not because I feel pain, but because I feel gratitude. That place reminds me of the version of Callum Hayes who had nothing left but choice. That night could have turned into bitterness, self-pity, or blame. Instead, it turned into clarity. It stripped away distraction and forced me to rebuild on stronger foundations. The city that once felt cold now feels honest. London never promised comfort. It rewards value and resilience. I had to learn that the hard way. If someone asks me today what changed my life, I do not say success. I say loss. Loss showed me my weaknesses. Loss revealed my habits. Loss forced me to grow. Success was only the result of that growth. Looking back, the week I thought destroyed me actually refined me. It removed illusions and exposed truth. I thought I had been replaced because I was not enough. In reality, I had simply stopped evolving. When I started evolving again, everything shifted. Chapter 5 is not about standing above anyone. It is about standing firmly within myself. I no longer measure my worth by titles, relationships, or public approval. I measure it by effort, discipline, and integrity. The applause at events fades. The contracts change. The market moves. But character remains. And character was built in the quiet mornings, the long walks, the rejection emails, and the nights when giving up would have been easier. The real comeback was not visible on a stage. It happened in silence. It happened when I decided that being invisible to others did not mean being invisible to myself. The truth is simple. You can lose your job, your marriage, and your home in 7 days. But you only truly lose your future if you stop building. I did not stop. I slowed down, I struggled, I questioned myself, but I did not stop. And that made all the difference. Today when people look at my life, they see stability again. They see growth, confidence, and progress. What they do not see is the man in the car choosing not to brake. They do not see the quiet study sessions, the silent tears of frustration, the decision to focus instead of react. But I see him clearly. And I respect him. Because without that version of me, this version would not exist. In the end, London did not take everything from me. It took the weak foundations and forced me to build stronger ones. It took comfort and replaced it with clarity. It took illusion and replaced it with discipline. And for that, I am grateful. My name is Callum Hayes, and the week I lost everything was the week I began again.